was actually talking to Tim on the way here. I don't actually think I know, Blake, how you got involved with Christian Educational Ministries.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird story. It surprised me as any person, right? I describe it as a want I didn't know I had. That it was, I love Rondo, and he's the reason why I'm a baptized Christian. I grew up around the church, and my parents were a part of the Church of God International, worldwide. My grandfather was on the board for Church of God International for many years, was responsible for building the facility out off Lake Palestine. Heavily involved, right? And my father died when I was one in a car accident, car accident. Yeah, and so that was on car accident. Didn't see that coming, and of course, so that threw our family into disarray. Mom grew up in the 60s, kind of a flower child at heart, hippy dippy, love and all that, and fair enough, was in vogue. And but she wanted to give me the opportunity to choose what I believed in. And, that sounds really progressive. It sounds really interesting. It sounds like you're going to let this child choose what they believe, right? I'm not going to force my ideology down your throat and all this stuff. And I'll say that I think it's important to express to your children what you believe and why you believe it. I don't think you guys would disagree with that. But there's value in that, and there's value in doing it in a certain kind of way, maybe that is not as trenchant or sharp and cutting, right? But you're more, hey, look, this is the way I look at it, and these are the reasons why I look at it.
I've always thought for myself, because my parents did the same thing, that the most impactful thing for me was seeing their passion.
Yeah.
Like I think I don't have kids, but I'd imagine the most impactful thing is showing your kids that you're passionate about things in general. So whether it's like my dad's taste in music, seeing your parents be passionate about something, and then you loving your parents, you want to share in their passions. And both my parents were passionate about the church, and so they gave me that same latitude, me and my brother both. But then we're like, man, I can't imagine anything better than that. So I'd imagine it's similar with you.
Yeah. That sounds like the balanced approach I'm talking about. She went in the other ditch. She went to the other ditch of just, hey, look, do you want to go to temple? Do you want to go to, wherever?
I don't know.
Yeah. Exactly. No, exactly. And it's like, all right, well, can we go to Chuck E. Cheese? I believe that, anatomical rat might have something to say about, something meaningful in life, but no, I think that you're right. It needs to be, passion communicates, and children are extreme. I have a 4-year-old, who's quickly going to be 5, and they detect, they can really, whether they can articulate it or not is maybe arguable, but they'll see if you're actually passionate about something, and they'll get they have these mirror neurons that are always going, and they're kind of handicapping everything you say. So anyways, I think that's right. But anyway, so I ended up going to temple. My last name is Silverstein for those that don't know. I don't know if there's a more Jewish last name, Blake Silverstein, leading Christian Educational Ministries. What's going on?
That
here?
is funny, but never even occurred to me.
Yeah, man, yeah. So father was Jewish, and mom, married 2 Jews actually. So seems like the Old Testament at least, but nonetheless, father passed away. Wanted to kind of figure out what I wanted, so I ended up going to temple a lot. Kind of seeing what's going on there. She was into, reading tarot cards and all this stuff, right? And growing up. And so she was kind of getting all this kind of weird stuff, kind of introduced me to all this stuff. And I actually look back on it as something that I appreciate, because I can tell you why all those ideologies are hollow, why all of them kind of, when you run them to their conclusion, end up in some form of you're a drop of water that slips back into the ocean, and you're like, well, wait, man, I'm the drop. Hold on, that's a nice way of saying annihilation, right? That's a nice way of saying you become a part of the one whole. Anyways, there's a lot of things I could because I ran the gambit through them, and I said, look, this doesn't seem to pass the smell test, and then I went to all boy Catholic school.
Man.
Yeah. So, here you have, and they didn't know what to do with me either, right? At that point, I've been, my mom kind of came back to the church at that point, and I'm now, here we are, Blake Silverstein, in an all-boy Catholic school, and wait, so you are Christian, you're not Jewish, but you don't go to church on Sunday, you go on Saturday, and it's like, they didn't know what to do with me, except for haze me, the hazing was real, and, the fathers would always, roll their eyes in theology class. Yes, Mr. Silverstein, raising my hand. Another question for you guys. But so I ended up, being very, I described it as I saw Mass on one side, I saw the other magical show on the other side, let's say at Temple, in Judaism. And I kind of see, this kind of thing happening where it seems like there's something weird going on over here, there's something weird going on over here, and I'm not really, it's perceived kind of hypocrisy is what's going on. And so I spent a lot of my teenage years trying to figure out why the humanist point of view is real, right? I wanted that to be real. I wanted there to be a materialistic explanation because of, I'd had a lot of pain, a lot of loss. Lost my grandfather, lost my grandmother within quick succession, lost uncles and aunts, my mother, and then, just a couple of years ago, my father. And so it was like, up until maybe my mid-20s, I was still trying to find a different explanation. And after the passing of my mother to cancer, I said, okay, well, let's really dig deep here, right? I was kind of doing surface level stuff, and so I really dug deep, and I realized I kind of came full circle, right? I set out for orthodoxy, sailed off this island, and kind of came, circumvented the whole world, I feel like, and came back to that we, really did probably have the best take on the oldest story that's ever been told, and that I hung my hat on that this is the story of my ancestors. This was probably it. And as I started to search through Church of God doctrines, that I saw that these people were actually taking scripture and drawing it to themselves, right? They were on the border of being fundamentalist, right? But they weren't, to the point of cutting off their hand if it made them sin or plucking out their eye, right? But they're trying to really, figure out when it's important to keep the letter and when and how the Spirit has to come through. And so that was for me, why I started to, and that was also because of Ron, my dad. This is all from Ron Dart's the reason why I'm a baptized Christian, and so my dad turned me on to Ron Dart, because I was seeing some problems even inside the Church of God, explaining some of the things that we were doing, the validity of the holy days and these things. And then I read the thread, watched some of Ron's seminars and sermons rather, and then he answered some questions, some hard questions for me. The idea of a hellfire, that a loving and caring God would send all these people to hell. That just did not work for me. That would not only send them to hell, but would torture them for eternity. It's like, this is not correct. And if it is correct, then I don't want anything to do with it. Was kind of my stance. And then Ron helped to explain some of the nuance there. And then that was when I just said, all right, cool. So late 20s, I became baptized. And, started a construction company, got married, and was doing very well financially, clicking along. My wife and I are, now she's expecting, and life is just going great. And I'm attending a church, Katy Christian Fellowship, and that's, one of the pastors there is Richard Crow. He's on the board for CGN, and he says, "Hey man, we're looking." And Ron had just passed away, and so he's like, "Hey, look, we're looking for someone to head up the helm over at CGN. We think you'd be a good fit. We've been searching for a while now, and we've gone through all of the stack, right? And they kept running into this problem where they didn't want someone coming in and using this as a platform to push their own agenda, right? It wasn't meant to be, it's not meant to be that. It's meant to kind of keep Ron on the air and kind of managing that. But there is to a degree, it's weird. It's you have to kind of have some skin in the game, right? And some direction here, but we don't want you to start, again, pushing your agenda, pushing your ideologies or whatever. And so I came in for a couple of interviews. Larry Watkins, said, I think, he would be a good fit. They put it forth to the rest of the board members. And, United was you kind of, there's this coalition, right? There's different people from different churches on the board for CEM trying to be this kind of, again, representations of the different churches of God inside of CEM. And they all said, let's give them a chance, let's try it out. And that was, about 3 years ago. And so here I am, man, and my wife was not happy, right? Not happy at all. You want to do what? You want to, hang up, 6-figure plus, income, and take a huge pay cut, and go where? Where? We're in Houston, Texas.
Right.
All our family's here. All her family. I said, yeah. So yeah, there's this whole thing that's missing in there, which is like, I said, I'm going to pray about it. I told Richard whenever he came to me to say, hey, look, we would be interested in hiring you, possibly, or interviewing you. So I'm like a no, So I appreciate the offer, and it's really, but I'm like thinking, man. Ron is like, there's this in my heart, it's tugging my heartstrings, right? Because it's Ron Dart's ministry, who's like the reason why he's the reason why I'm here, and I'm believing you, Lord, and all this stuff, and so I'm like, all right, honey, well, I'm just going to pray about it. How about that? And she's like, no, kind of thing. And so I pray about it, and I'm like, come to her a couple of days later, and I say, hey, look, I'm pretty sure God wants me to go out to Tyler, Texas, and try this thing out. And she's like, okay, well, like, what am I supposed to say, right? Like, how am I supposed to respond to this, right? Oh, I don't want you to go follow what you think is the Lord's will for you. And so, like, good on her. She's like at least open to the conversation, but she's letting her displeasure be known, which I think is an important characteristic in a marriage. You need to let your displeasure be known without fighting. Your ability to do that is like, it's really important. And I said, okay, I understand that. And she said, but I'm not going to go up there unless you go up there and start to work, and it seems to work out. And so that makes sense. I said, well, hey, look, at that point, I was like, they haven't even interviewed me. This is like so, they're probably going to say no. They're going to like realize that I'm like, I have no background. I haven't gone to homiletics or any kind of seminary or anything like this. They're going to go, oh gosh, this is, what do you mean? So my brother, Dr. Tim Weissman, just got out of school and said to me, look, 12 years my senior, right? And when Dad died, he was like the guy I looked up to, right? My father figure. And I'm going to school, and I'm like, and I'm working at the same time because I didn't have a windfall. I didn't have, any kind of money, really, and so I'm like having like struggle and work through all this. And he says, like, you started your own business. I was doing media metamorphosis, as I still remember that business. And it was basically taking old people's old records and transferring them to MP3s, right?
Oh, nice.
and I was like, but that was like back when I was like 17 or 18, right? Yeah. 18, it was when I started, and then, 19 and 20. So like, that was a cutting edge back then. People were like, oh my gosh, you can do this. And, yeah. So he's like, you're making money. Like, he's like, I just got done spending tons of money, going to school for a piece of paper. Blake's what I ended up spending, all this money for. He says, if you're going to go do something, just go do it and learn from it. And I'm so happy he did tell me to do that, because he said, we have the internet now, man. You can go learn whatever you want to go learn. There's a library, there's the internet. Go look it up, go read. You're smart. You'll be fine. And in some ways, I'm happy he told me that, but in some ways there's now a desire to maybe go back to school for things I actually find interesting.
That's sort of the way to do it. At least for me, I worked for a few years and then decided, okay, I want to stay in the nonprofit realm. Let me go back for, the degree I did. So it's interesting because we talk about wanting to discuss issues surrounding youth in the church and youth retention, or sort of the issues facing young people in the church. And in your story, and I'd imagine in Tim's, and I'll talk about mine a bit, you touch on issues regarding living life, hard questions, struggle. Mine involves, failure, coming to terms with your own need for Christ and things like that. And there's no shortcuts. And the idea that answering those hard questions is a key factor in lighting a fire under a young person. I guess for you, it seemed like the fire was already lit, like this passion or this internal angst or struggle to try to find answers that were gnawing at you. So the fire was there, but having the answer sort of being the the addressing of hard questions that you didn't find elsewhere.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you think about it. Carl Jung says this really great thing. He says, no tree can reach to heaven without its roots in hell. It's like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, look, man, you can just go off and say you believe something blindly, or you can actually like see and experience life, the hell, of life, and then go, well, this is why this is real, at least for me. And I vapidly thrust through life for a long time trying to figure out, like I said, I'll be honest, I tried to figure out every reason why the Christian story was not real. Mm-hmm. I did not want it to be real, and I'll be transparent about that, and God knows my heart, so whatever, he knew it. And there was just this idea of really what is true, what is real, and the existential angst that comes along with that desire, was fueling me. And I was left alone. My family, I turned around and everyone died. It was like, and it was like, okay, well, and then you have this whole quandary of, well, am I just looking for heaven because I want to see them and I miss them, right? And then I had to like really just kind of handicap it back to, no, this is I believe these things because, and that's the beginning of a manifesto, right, for myself. And I think that people should sit down and create for themselves why.
I bet you've talked with Seth about that.
He came to mind, he's still, you got to do this thing. I'm like, well, and I kind of did this thing, for me loosely in my own, my own way, which is to really, no one around, by yourself. Why do you believe what you believe? Yeah. And if you can't articulate it, then maybe you should, maybe you should scrap it. Yeah. And then come back and the idea of the prodigal son returns is kind of what comes to mind, right? So,
and it's interesting. I'll give a brief synopsis because we originally were going to address it in the opening episode of the podcast, me and my brother, but we just like scrapped that part of it. So I'll tell people a bit about my story upbringing. I'll let Tim do a brief one as well, because I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of, I mentioned sort of before we started recording that a big thing for me was the passion of my parents. So I remember being a kid, and my story in the church is being in Worldwide for a long time. So you had the big splits in terms of like 92 and 95 and after CGI and all that, but there was a group of people who stayed in Worldwide who kept the Sabbath and the holy days and all the sort of the core doctrines of the Church of God, but for one reason or another decided that it wasn't the right thing to do to leave the organization. And so my family was part of that group. We were in a worldwide congregation until like 2006. And at that point, the local minister said, we're going to Sunday. And of course, that was not amenable to us. We're like, no, we're not. And so we wound up being on our own. So we've been a small independent church of, 20 or so people since 2006. And everyone says to me, that must have been so hard. Like I didn't meet young people my own age until I was 16, 17. It was only at a feast. And so my good friends in the church were always my parents' friends or their peers. And I remember thinking, especially when I was in my 20s and now in my 30s, it was so impactful and so cool to watch my parents struggle against the apostate ministry for like 16 years. Maybe less than that, because of course in the beginning it wasn't until early mid 90s that things really hit the fan. But seeing for the majority of my life that I was cognizant of, my parents would listen to a message that was completely wrong in church, and them and the whole crew that was like-minded would talk about why it was wrong. Everyone was knowledgeable, men, women, just some of the most biblically literate and on fire people I've ever met to this day. And the idea of being in battle or in a purposeful struggle was so impactful to me that sort of by the time I hit adulthood, and by that point that had been removed from our life because we're now independent. Now Grace Communion International, which WCG is, went away to do other things, at least in our area. And it was that passion stayed with me. I remember thinking when I was a kid, 7, 8 years old, man, that's the coolest thing in the world. Like being in God's church, being involved in that dynamic discussion. When I'm an adult, I want that. And so I was baptized at 18. And the interesting thing is, when you're baptized at 18, most of your life struggles come while you're converted.
Yeah,
because how much
yeah.
do you really struggle in your preteen and early teen years? Like life hasn't hit you.
Yeah,
you haven't lived on your own.
Yeah.
You haven't gone. So I went through this really tough and interesting, really decade of encountering things for the first time, struggling, failing in a massive way, coming to terms with my own need for Christ in a personal way. And I came out of it sort of telling people, I felt like a second generation Christian growing up. My parents were in the church and everything. And I definitely felt that way. And then by my mid-20s, I feel like a first generation Christian. And I completely identify with that way of thinking. I realized I had been engaged in it and it didn't work out, and realizing that I was putting so many things above my relationship with God and my conversion process, and learning to cope with disappointment or boredom or whatever it was with a certain thing, and just all these crutches and falling into bad patterns of behavior. And I never had the period that some people do where they leave the church and then come back. It's like I did all my struggling firmly in it. But
listen to the quitter.
But it's a weird. I was talking to my dad about this the other day. It's actually a weird dynamic to be first encountering your need for Christ and falling short in such a massive way, but still I know this is true. I'm learning so much, but I have this failure as a juxtaposition.
Yeah.
But anyway, that
identity crisis almost in some way. Maybe.
Yeah, it wasn't so much identity crisis, but it was like, what is this? And just coming to terms with no, this is the human experience. And my parents are great. At no point did they judge or anything. They said, the moment I came to them, I said, I have to tell you something, I'm struggling with this. And instead of being judgmental, I remember my dad going, this is what we've been talking about. It was almost sort of like he reached over and shook my hand and said, welcome to the club. You're now a member.
It sounds like you have really great crayons, actually. It sounds like you have really great crayons.
But the thing too from the beginning was that passion. And I'm trying to reiterate that because I think it's key to talking about the sort of retention of youth and the struggles young people run into in the church. And that is, I feel like you got to have that fire, and I don't know how it gets lit. And there was at one level of fire for the church growing up because of my parents and seeing that, but then my personal failure with that real fire and relationship for Christ. So there's no real, I don't think administrations of churches can fast track that for people. I think the best thing they could do is be there to support people when they do encounter failure or tough questions, not tell them you shouldn't be asking that, and I'll stop that for the sake of letting Tim talk. But that's my story in a nutshell. And worldwide for a long time, and then independent for a bit.
Thanks for sharing. There's a lot in that I identify with too, because I grew up in the church as well. My parents started attending in the 60s, and when I came along, it was really, my earliest memories were in the midst of the worldwide split up in the early 90s. And then, you're 5, 6, 7 years old. You don't really have any consciousness of what's going on, except this, man, church last week was really big. Church this week is a lot smaller. I remember, I think it was, we started going to Global in 95, and I remember our first feast there, and from there we basically I've been in Global / living my whole adult life, attending there. And I identify too with, I think something you're uncovering is the criticality of the parents' role in trying to foster within their kids that passion for the truth and that engagement. And looking back, I can see that from my parents, the engagement from my dad, like making sure there's intentional, family Bible studies, stuff like that. And then, it has to land on, I don't want to say good soil, but for lack of a better metaphor, right? It has to land on somebody who's receptive to it.
Certainly, both parts.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I took a lot of interest in it. And so I came to the point of actually too, when I was 15 years old, I went to LYC, Living Youth Camps, and back then it was directed by Gerald Weston, who's now the presiding evangelist of Living. And that was the first time that I actually started thinking about baptism. Like, up to that point, I was interested, but just that environment and the positive reinforcement of healthy values there really kind of inspired that in me. So I came back, talked to my dad. He's a pastor, so said, "Hey, can we talk about baptism?" And he was like, "Well, you're 15. You should, probably, think about that, give it a couple of years, and then come back." So when I was 18, I came back and we counseled, and so I got baptized. And then, absolutely, when you're 18, you still know absolutely nothing about anything.
You think you do.
You think you do. And then, it hits the fan, and I moved out, had some life experience, had some fun and partying in college and all that stuff. So never left the church, but in certain ways it's like my body was there, but the spirit was not in certain ways. And then too, like, some of my family wound up leaving Living, and I went through a period there of trying to figure out my place in the whole church community. And that's when I started, my mindset changed a little bit, where I was a little bit more open to other people within the Church of God community and attending elsewhere and just exploring my options, and wound up staying with Living eventually for a number of reasons. But that was my point, really, where I had the breakthrough growth phase into making the faith not just that of my parents or people around me, but really my own.
Yeah. There's no... That's the thing. We talked about this earlier today, but the conversation around retaining young people always has sort of, just personally, I get the intent, but it's always sort of just a little bit rubbed me the wrong way, because it implies a degree of control over young people that you don't have.
It's the commoditization of the congregation, right? It's creating consumer Christians. Absolutely. It feels weird. It feels like using the word revenue when you talk about, church growth, right? Or these kind of, financial terms, which, by the way, it has that feeling. I agree with you, man.
It's sort of like it's the same way the term revenue is a reality. It's just it connotes something odd, but at the same time, I get what's being discussed, and that is young people aren't staying. Why is that?
And why should they? I'll bring up the point. Why should they? Right? I mean, what's going on with us right now? Would you? Look, and I don't mean that in kind of a combative way, but like, let's really ask the question: should they, and why should they, if they should? Because right now, there's a lot of research to say that the kids don't buy it. Because, and you said something earlier, which was really great. Your body was there, but the spirit wasn't, right? And it's like, maybe that's what's going on for them, that they see their parents. You guys both have really good parents, it sounds like. That's not the case for everyone. They're not putting that passion. And so maybe this falls on the shoulders of the parents more than it does the church. I don't know. I'm just.
Well, there's a couple things in there, and one is, I've been thinking about this a lot, that I don't think it's a weird expectation we have that we would retain more youth than we'd lose. Like, I don't see that in Scripture. I also don't see in Scripture a real concern with trying to accommodate a specific segment of the congregation. It's like God is calling people of all ages into the body to be part of the bride, and those people need to grow and they need to be assisted, and we all have a role to play in being the body and being kings and priests in the world tomorrow. And I don't know if expecting year-over-year growth and youth retention is something we should expect. It's one of those, it's a very hard life. God's calling a small group of people now, and that might not even be a reasonable benchmark to have. And
to just be focused on watering and planting, maybe this is the idea. Maybe we should be having meaningful conversations with young people and just letting it kind of,
I mean, I can tell you the camp program was instrumental to me, maintaining and staying in the church, right? Now, if it hadn't been there, maybe some other mechanism would have helped me. I don't know. But
what do you think that was about?
It just, I think the environment there captured a taste of what the culture that we were trying to promote and exercise in the church, which was really a reflection of God's kingdom, or what we want that to be. And I caught that vision, and that spoke to me. And to me, the whole appeal, whether I'm 10 years old, 20 years old, or now, older, is that this is where the truth is being taught, explored, exercised, and focused on. And I don't know if that's regardless of demographic or age group or categorization. You either want that or you don't.
Yeah, I wonder if that's the thing. Another thing I've been thinking of a lot lately is, like, I don't think you can't like usher someone in through the process of conversion and struggling through things. Like, people just have to experience it. I think maybe sometimes we try to put a bubble around certain people. I get it. I would imagine if you're a parent, it's a very easy thing to want to do, like just to protect your child. I obviously don't have that experience, but like I can understand it. But there's sort of we have to let people go through their life, and you give guidance and advice, but you got to let people fail. Like
the overly attached mother, that's not able to cut the apron strings, right? That causes more problems than it does solve them. And that's an issue, right? Kind of what you're talking about. You got to let them find safe ways for them to fail, and then to be there, to give them maybe the answers to why.
Where it might not even be safe. Like, I know a lot of people who struggle with, my daughter just left the church, and it's an interesting phenomenon when they phrase it that way, because you're taking. The human life is could be a long life, and you're taking a moment in time snapshot of a person's development and making a definitive statement about what they've done. Whereas maybe what they need is 5 years away and to learn this for themselves, and they come back. Maybe that's exactly what they need, and how God is going to work with them to come back. Like, you don't know. And I think that's the hard part, is that we want people to follow a certain path of conversion, and I don't always think it's that simple. I wonder if the thing we can do is, as a body, is just not be impediments to that process. I feel like at times maybe we don't always have the best questions, depending on who your support, or the best answers to the hard questions, depending on who your support system is. Like, I was personally always encouraged to ask tough questions, or to, if I disagreed, to say something. But if you grew up in an environment where that wasn't the case, it's very hard to navigate through the hard questions you encounter as you enter adulthood.
Yeah, certainly. I keep coming back to this, some of the things I've read that young people say about the church, and who knows, they don't know anything. They're kids, right? They're young, right? What do they know? But this is their experience, right?
All the demographics of who's listening to the podcast, just like all the 15 to 20.
Yeah. What do I know? I'll tell you what I know. I'm not listening to you right now. But in other words, take this with a grain of salt. But no, their experience is valid, absolutely. We should be listening to them, and we should be asking them some of these questions. The thing, what should we be doing? It's a bunch of gray hair people sitting around a table talking. It's like, well, for starters, maybe we just ask them. That's a novel idea. How about we just ask them what's going on, right? Mm-hmm. And then listen to them. But some of the things they've been saying, from what I've read, is like the perceived hypocrisy, which. That's a big one. And I don't know, and that was my big hang up, right? It was like, And so what do you do then? It's like, what does one do if that's the idea? Well, you show them where you are failing. You share with them your struggle. Like the best thing I saw my dad do was like fail gracefully, right? To be upset, but not taken out. Something like this, right? And there's situations where
it's so tough, man.
But you watch them and how they handle themselves, right? Not what he was saying, what was he doing, and that was huge for me. And that's what I want to be like him. I say my dad, my stepdad, my
But you look at like David when the situation with Bathsheba,
yes,
murder, adultery. He was told this kid is gravely ill. He prays to God, like let my son live.
Yeah.
And the answer is nope. He gets up and he worships God. It's like, well, what can I do? It's this, and I marvel at that. I was talking again, I think it was to my brother or someone, that the two templates for me in terms of when you encounter failure, and not just failure like I got fired from a job, but I failed my God's and my own moral standard. And how do you respond to that? And David's a template, and I also, this is a little bit of a joke, but for me, like the NFL quarterback, this idea that the ideal NFL quarterback has a short memory, that whether you throw a touchdown or an interception, it's just on to the next play, and you forget about the past thing, because you realize it was wrong, he's in the past, you move forward. That very practical, but also in the case obviously of David or Paul, very spiritually mature, almost next level maturity, sort of dealing with failure.
Yeah, to be informed by your mistakes, but not controlled or determined by it, right? And to not dwell on it, to ruminate on it, but to still focus on. And that's a balancing act. That's rough, But I mean, to kind of get back to this, I think what they're looking for is something authentic, because they're being told right now at school and at university and heck, even by their own parents, maybe, who knows, and family members, that like it's not your fault. And that's not correct, right? It's like, they know it's their fault. That's not correct. And so it's like they're not even being told what's so. And so they're looking, and I think that based on for what's being, what some of the other experiences are, for love of the truth, they will come to the church. And I think we have to have faith in that. And the thing that we got to make, we need to make sure that we do is to share our story, share our struggles, be transparent, be vulnerable. It's like, man, there's been a culture of do not show them, never let them see you sweating kind of thing. Oh, yeah. And from the pulpit, you better know the answer. And it was interesting. The other day, someone pulled me aside, and I'm newly giving messages, newly ordained, and so it's like, that's a terrifying thing. But I said, hey, I don't know. There's a couple different ways of looking at this, and like, you might have seen just everyone's jaw dropped. I said, I don't know from up there. It's like, and I don't. There's multiple ways of looking at this.
The interesting thing too, though, not only are they getting the message largely from the world predominantly, that it's not your fault, but I sometimes, and not all the time, I know some really great people, ministers in the church who don't do this, but I think too often we convey the message in the church when people fail and they decide they want to become vulnerable and share their failure. Well, that's not only is it completely your fault, but Christians don't do that. Failure, that kind of failure is not like Christians struggle, but like they only struggle this much. What you just did is beyond that. And we don't offer very often. We aren't able to offer the perspective to young people. Look, man, most of the time they know it's wrong already. They're coming to you because they're distraught. Right. And it's like, hey, this is the human experience. The failure, this is sort of a cynical thing, but like, get used to it, man. Like you're going to be struggling against yourself your whole life. That's what conversion is. Conversion is you were called into the God family, and Christ didn't. I'm plagiarizing this from another person's message. It's not my original thought. But when you're baptized, Christ doesn't look at you and go, you know what? This is a good structure. It just needs some windows, needs a coat of paint, and they'll be good. It's a gut job. He tears you down and rebuilds you.
That's C.S. Lewis, yeah.
And so the idea that people in the Church of God would not confront the same kinds of failures people in the world do is ridiculous. The difference is when we confront them, we try to address it. We try to understand what in me is broken that led to that, and how do we move past it? How do I learn? How do I become more like Christ? Whereas people in the world are either completely blind to it, or they revel in it. They say, this is great. This is my struggle with X issue is perfectly fine, and they're lost.
Also, too, you mentioned, it's a common thought that kids are upset with, or, young people are upset with perceived hypocrisy, right? Well, also, too, like, on the other hand, they're hypocrites as well. Like, everybody's a hypocrite at one point or another as well.
That's right.
It's like they're over here accusing this person or this minister of, oh, well, you're a hypocrite because of X, Y, Z. Like, well, okay, you're over there doing what you're doing, too. So it's there's a give and take to that,
Certainly, and there's value in saying, like, well, how am I contributing to this thing too, right? And did I just like sit there at this message and someone asked me if it was a good message and say, oh yeah, it was great, it was good. You didn't think it was good.
But I actually mentioned this a while ago to someone that I was talking to about this very issue, because I don't think that's actually hypocrisy. The idea that, hey, we have a standard or a moral standard or something and we fall short. To me, that's not hypocrisy. That's just that's a struggle. To me, the perceived hypocrisy that young people see. Now, I don't want to pretend to speak for all young people. But at least the kind of hypocrisy that I react emotionally to is when, or the kind that some of my friends have confided in me that they saw growing up left and right and really damaged them, is when their parents have a church face. And they say all these things and they show no intention of ever trying to work on it at home. It's not that, hey, I fell short, or hey, I yelled at your mother, or I'm struggling with this thing. Our inability to perfectly live up to God's righteousness is like just par for the course. But when we say that we're a certain way, and then not only do we fall short, but we don't acknowledge it, and we don't make any effort to try to be any different. We're just like either playing church, whatever the phrase you want to use. That's the kind of hypocrisy that I think young people really bothers them, and I think drives people out in droves, because like, this can't be real, because I'm seeing this and I see no genuineness in the execution.
It kind of comes back to the parents again. You were saying, this kind of falls on the shoulders of the parents, and
it's exacerbated by if they see it in other people in addition. Like, oh, it's everyone.
Yeah, it's all of them. And exactly that. I mean, it's there's this ineloquent saying, you can't give away what you don't got, baby. And it's like, hey, look, and they'll pick up on that, and they really will. They'll see, okay. And we all say better than we do, right? That's the thing of it, right? And you're kind of like trying to deal with that, trying to like, grapple with that. And if your kids see you struggling with that, I think that the fear, it's so funny. A context of fear, it does so much damage. It really does. Leaders who operate out of fear will cause a lot of damage. And I think a lot of times they have these kind of layup sermons and messages. And hey, look, I've been giving some of those messages. I feel like I'm like, look, it's interesting. It's kind of fascinating, but is it really substantive? Is it really going to help you with what you're dealing with right now? Probably not. And that's been something I've been kind of trying to struggle with myself is, how do I actually say something that is, I'm not going to set the church back 150 years, get me fired, but also, be meaningful and sincere and open and honest and say, hey, look, these are the things that I deal with. And maybe you can see yourself in here somewhere and get some value. And there's this great thing that Jordan Peterson says in his latest book. He says, don't hide something. Don't hide it in the fog. Something like this, and it's like be transparent with people, be open with them. Don't play church, right? Playing church is hiding it in the fog, right? It's like, oh no, everything's fine, everything's great. But meanwhile, it's there in the fog, right? It's there in front of you, and that's like. And
you don't need to give explicit detail, right? Like you don't. I think it is good.
There is none of your business. There is none of your business, right? Sure, that. And my parents would say that's not your business, But you can talk sort of
in vagaries about struggle, right? Like you don't have to tell someone that your marriage is struggling about this very specific issue, but you can openly acknowledge hey, we struggle or I struggle, and it's not just that like, hey, I accidentally snapped at my wife. Like it goes beyond that. Like it's
absolutely.
and just generally operating under the just basically just being open that you do struggle and struggle in big ways, and you don't have to be crazy open. But I think if people talk in those with that kind of language enough, people will get the message. Okay, these are not perfect people, because the number of stories I hear about people coming into the church from the world, and they all say, my first impression when I came into the congregation was, oh, all these people are perfect and I can't. And of course they all say, and I learned that they're not perfect. We all struggle,
Sure.
but it's you don't want to inadvertently give off that impression.
Yeah, there's that. I also, it occurs to me the point that this isn't just unique to the church or the church environment. Everybody on initial meeting tries to present a certain face and a certain
Social media is built on it.
Yeah, right. Social media is built on that. So, I don't want to be overly negative or say this is a failure of the church. It's just a failure of humanity.
Yeah, it's part of that human struggle.
And it's like you find this balancing act of letting your displeasure be known, but don't blow up, right? Don't go into the gritty little details, right? I mean, really, there's a kind of a happy medium between the two. I think that people end up in one ditch or the other. There's this like lost art of the sensible center, and there's just swinging for the fences, and you're trying to do this thing. What are you? They're doing something up there, from the pulpit, and it's like, just. To be sincere and to be, kind of direct with people. And I think that's what the youth is missing. Direct, conversations about their inability to do the things that they've been striving to accomplish, right? And here's some things you can try out.
Right. And because I think we also want to be clear, we're not trying to, armchair quarterback the leadership in the church. I mean, and I think the people on this episode right here are in an interesting position because you're in a leadership position. Yeah. My dad's a minister. Your dad's a minister. Like, we grew up with it. We completely understand the realities and the difficulties of giving messages, being a leader in the church, and by extension, because we've grown up in that sphere, we know the other leaders. We've talked with tons of leaders as part of Church of God Network, completely sympathetic to the struggle. And when we talk about the church having issues, it's also not just a leadership problem. Like this is top to bottom, and it's more of a rallying cry to, hey, let's all try to address this in our own way.
Yeah, we're kind of creating a straw man here, right? And kind of, taking this down, right? Oh, this is great. It's all their fault. But no, I think you're right. There are good people in the church, obviously, who are struggling with the same issue. And I think there is this, because the culture that's been kind of created, I think, and we're all complicit, right? Kind of going along with all this, that we've all created a culture of kind of having it all together. And again, that doesn't pull for what I'll call authentic communication from the pulpit, right? And then that breeds authenticity and vulnerability, right? And then you're kind of in a safe space. Woo, there it is. But
it's a shame there isn't a better way to make that comment.
It's really good, because there is value in letting the pretense or the context being like, hey, look, you won't say, I don't even know if that's true. What you say to me here in this moment, I will try to figure it out with you. And that was always my dad's, maybe this is like you said earlier, like your dad like shook your hand when you're saying, hey, I'm struggling with this thing. And I had the same thing with my dad, right? I was like, look, he says, look, if you have something, don't lie to me. I was like, oh man, okay. He's like, always be truthful with me. Always tell me, we'll figure it out together. And I remember thinking, we need that. We need that person. And so, I would say, even just for people in the church, it's not even say about young people, they need someone in the church, they need someone in their life that they can come to and tell them what they're dealing with, no matter what.
I just recorded a podcast episode with a good friend of mine, Bob Busey, who's a retired addiction counselor. Oh, wow. And that's exactly the prevailing wisdom in Alcoholics Anonymous in the sort of it's not emerging, it's been around for like 100 years now, but the idea of support groups and recovering from addiction, it's that we're not saying our parents or someone who is in a support group with you is going to say whatever you did, it's not wrong, it's like there's
Murders.
you know when I went to my dad about or not just my dad but both my parents and said like I have failed in this huge way. It's not like I'm struggling or being tempted, like I have failed already at this numerous times. It was one of those, well, me speaking as my parents, well, he already knows it's wrong. Obviously he's obviously distraught, so it's not, we don't have to beat him over the head with this, like he knows it. And this is par for the course of being human. Like, if it wasn't this, it'd be something else with him. So why would we be shocked like it was anything different? I remember watching, I don't even know what the program was. It was on TV, and I got a morbid fascination with it. It was like, they were following a Christian family, like some Protestant denominations. A Christian family was a reality show. And this woman, a girl, like in her 20s, married woman, was going to open up to her mother that day that she didn't enter into her marriage a virgin. And her mom broke down. Like her mother lost it. Like she was so disappointed in this girl or this woman, by that her daughter. And I thought, is that the right way to act?
Wait, was this recorded? Was it video recorded?
Yeah, it was reality. Yeah.
So I wonder how much that was like.
It could have been staged.
Sure. Not staged, but just kind of the face that we have to give here is that we are upset. You know, maybe she went over the top.
Sure.
Where she could have been. But the other thing is, well, oh yeah, that's okay. Like you said, oh, that's not a problem. That's okay. Like, how do we find this middle ground of like, well, that's not good. Well, you know, what do you think? What happened? You know, to get Jordan says to get curious. When you start to get like triggered or start getting really anxious about something, to get curious about what's going on over there.
Right.
And then to also even say that you're having to be the parent, be transparent with your team. I'm having a hard time processing this, and I'm not trying to make you feel bad. But I'm just wondering what took place.
I can imagine the parents feeling sort of guilty, like, oh man, what did we miss? Like, how can we have helped you more?
Yeah, making it about them.
But not even necessarily a selfish thing, just feeling guilty.
It's natural.
Both my parents opened up about, man, it's hard being a parent. Your kids get to adulthood, and you just think, man, I could have done so many things different. Yeah. What did I do to pass on things to you guys that we didn't want to pass on? But it's the same phenomenon in these support groups that, you go in and you're with people who have failed in the same sort of given way you have. And none of them are saying, oh, it's fine, keep doing it.
Yeah.
We've all acknowledged it's wrong. We've all acknowledged, we're not in control of our lives to a large extent. Like, it's hard. We're struggling against this. We need to grab hold of this and try to find a way to fix it or to move forward. And we're going to do that together. We're going to do that, being open with each other, acknowledging that we're struggling, and helping each other find a path forward. We're not saying it's okay, come here to feel good, but we're also not saying what you did is awful. You need to be on the fringes of society.
Yeah.
There's a care, and a part of that care is accountability, and that's that holding each other accountable as well. But you can't do that if you don't know, and if you don't share, and if you're not free to have a safe space, quote unquote, to exercise that vulnerability to share with your brothers in Christ.
So good. And it's a structure
And a process. Yeah.
And so I have a morning call with my buddy. We talk every morning, and we say, look, all right, so what did and what didn't you do? And we won't call each other out, but we'll just, we'll it's an accountability partner, right? And it's just about
that's great.
Just things that you're doing, and there's just kind of a checking in sometimes, and then sometimes there's hey, look, I've been resisting this thing, and without getting too detailed here, it's an ability to basically confess our sins one to another, right? Yeah. And not with this big buildup of it's going to be this big dramatic thing. It's just kind of hey, this is a way to clear it. It's a way to clear it away from me so I can move forward like David, right? It's not about dwelling in this sin, right? It's about, okay, I'm going to redouble my efforts next time, and try to take a little bit of ground each day, and that's the hopefully you have some forward momentum, right? You're gonna kind of meander back and forth towards your goal. You're gonna fail and understand, but as long as you're constantly moving, ticking it forward a little bit, that's a good thing. And it's only myself that I'm measuring myself, right? And so that I would say that everyone should have their person, whoever that is.
And my dad likes talking about that what God expects when it comes to dealing with sin and struggles with yourself, that God looks for willingness, effort, and perseverance. Because this idea that we're going to overcome everything before we die is ridiculous. Like, we're going to carry, there are certain struggles we have that we're going to carry to our graves. And there might be struggles we have right now that we will have when we die. But it's not that you go, I'm always going to have it, so I'm not going to address it.
Yeah, that's the balancing act.
He wants to see that we're willing to change, that we're trying to change, and that no matter how often we fail, we're going to continue trying to change. Gary Petty has a great statement in one of his messages that we just can't leave the job site. Like, we just have to stay here and keep working. Our obligation is to not leave the job site. And I think those two things in conjunction, those two sort of sayings are the right ones. And I like the accountability part of the thing. It's, I don't have direct experience with AA, but my understanding is that's what a sponsor sort of is. If Tim and I were both alcoholics and I'm new and Tim's my sponsor and I call him up, Tim, I fell off the wagon. It's been, a month in, I fell off the wagon. He goes, okay, man, well, let's go to the diner, get a cup of coffee. Let's talk about it. Like, how do you need me to pull you out of the situation? It's the equivalent of that.
Talk about
It's a really effective. It's a really effective mechanism.
And it's a weird kind of fallacy to operate from too, by the way, because like, if we do have the Holy Spirit that's operating in our life in varying degrees, right? And we are in a lot of ways kind of, poking around in the dark, as seriously, right? Because that's what Paul says. Like, look, you're struggling against things you can't even see. There are spirits that are in motion. They're moving. There's a vibrant community that's happening in that unseen realm, and like, you can't even confess what you've been struggling with your earthly brothers here, right? And you're being, kind of ravaged, and maybe who knows what's going on in that other world, right? And you can't even, get the help and assistance that we need here. You can't even get the basics down, let's say. And so that seems like that's just, man, how can you even react to what you're experiencing if you don't have the support and love of your brethren? I mean, for me, that's what's also going on in the background, that we don't even give the kids a fighting chance. And so what do? They can become numb and they kind of pleasure seek because they're so numb and they want to feel something, and then they go to these other churches that's their primary directive, is to make you feel something.
But
right?
even when you have that to a certain extent, even if you have some people who are supportive, that's such a human temptation. Like, there are all these things we carry with us. They're like, I need to numb this, or I need to. John Bradshaw is a writer. I don't actually know what his official credential. He's not a therapist, but he was very big in the 70s and 80s. He talks about very big in like on the addiction front and family dynamics. He talks about these things that we do that get us out of how we feel, get us, like, they mood alter.
Yeah,
they get us out of
consciousness.
And so whatever your learned crutch is, it could be a million different things. It could be an activity, it could be an emotion, it could be so many people just
a device.
It could be relationships. This perpetual need to find someone to be with and marry because you think that fills the hole in you that exists. And that's the real tough balance.
Well, the scripture says, look, you get the thief, and then you tell him not to do that anymore, and then you give him something to do with his hands. It's a really interesting bit in scripture. Like, why would you do that? Because you got to replace it with something. I think this guy's probably talking about, look, you have an addiction. You can't just cut it cold turkey. You have to fill it with something else. And and there's been this message kind of circling around my head about something about finding your balance, finding your flow, finding your ability to kind of deal with and overcome these unhealthy behaviors, but to systematically and slowly carve out new neurological pathways that help us to become successful in that endeavor. Because people find that if you remove this thing, you need to replace it with something else.
Yeah. That's a
James Clear. I mean, that goes back to habit formation. James Clear talks about that extensively in Atomic Habits, and that's kind of built on the work of Charles Duhigg, who works a lot on habit formation as well too. And that's been a message throughout the years, throughout the Church of God, is that when you are in the process of conversion, you're really replacing your carnal nature with the nature of God and taking that on as you become a new person. So it all goes together.
And that's a key point.
Yeah.
It's because there's a part of addiction recovery that's very functional that talks about replacing the addiction with a different habit. Working out's a very common one.
Yeah.
But you also have to get at the root cause. Mm-hmm. And the conversion process is not just about developing better habits. No. It's about changing nature. It's about removing the impetuses to want certain things over the course of your life. It's a process. And so it's not the trouble is, and I thought this was a brilliant point too, that Bradshaw talks about a bit, Carl Jung has talked about it a bit. The hole we're all trying to fill is a hole that is built into us that only can be filled by God. Mm-hmm. That's the hole we're all trying to fill with other things we think we want more than a relationship with God. The problem is that hole that's meant to be filled with a relationship with God will never be fully filled in this life. It's only when we're spirit. So there's a built-in yearning and pain that is in us that won't go away until we're spirit. That's the sort of the catalyst that's meant to drive us.
Yeah, that's a good thing. It's kind of counterintuitive, but that's the constantly striving after something you cannot touch or feel, right? That you will constantly be out there, that carrot. That's, so there's this idea of it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle, you know? It's trite, but it kind of fits the point here, right? We're saying, look, it's about, really substantive change in your life. That's, and like you're saying, it's working out. And it's interesting, I've been talking with this guy who's developing this program for taking, there's a couple Navy SEALs, ex-Navy SEALs who want to walk through a Christian boot camp and really going through the processes. What they do is they say, look, the Navy SEALs will break it down from, just what is your next step that you have to take to not be so overwhelmed by the mission, right? And because we usually get caught up in overwhelm and we're kind of replaying this scenario of I just can't do this. And you just all of a sudden you say, well, I'm just going to take that drink because I just can't deal with any of this anymore. It's forever. I'm never going to drink ever again. It's like, oh well, screw it or whatever, and so, but they've identified that there's a chemical in your brain that's they call it the quitting chemical. I can't remember. He gave me this prospectus. It's really pretty great. It's kind of like a retreat, But to go through and to understand that there's actually a chemical, right? And that if you just get, and they have some best practices to quit from having that chemical fire or whatever it is, to kind of, and that's, that there should be some practices. There's the box breathing. I don't know if you've heard of this, right? Where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds. And there's this idea that you can kind of control your breathing to do a pattern interrupt for yourself when you're in that kind of, and anyway, still, I think that might be giving people some tools, as opposed to just saying, hey, you just go pray about it or whatever.
So the interesting thing is, that's a very commonly understood thing. Again, in addiction recovery, one of the things Bob, Jussi, and I talk about is that addiction is when the space between impulse and action is removed. Yeah. People who are addicts don't have that. So most of us, right? Like if we get angry, we're able to take a step back and be like, I'm not going to punch that person in the face. You know what I mean?
That's right.
But if someone is a rageaholic, like it's a thing. People are like slaves to rage and addicted to it. They just react. Or if someone's an alcoholic, there's the impulse, then I'm going to do it. And part of recovery, sort of the practical tools to recovery is sort of reestablishing that space and time between impulse and action, so you could think through it, reason through it, and try to get your bearings.
And to realize that that's a muscle that you won't be very proficient at it in the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
In other words, that it'll get stronger over time, and there's a process in your brain called myelination, and it's basically it's a chemical that coats over the neurological pathways in your brain that broadens the bandwidth, and the more you try on something new, the more that the neurons fire down that neurological pathway. The stronger that neuron will become, and so you get better at it. There's, God built it that you will become transformed the more and more you do this thing, and that's been encouraging to me to steady my hand in moments of okay, it won't be this difficult always, right? Even with working out, especially, that's one of those things that you gotta push through the pain or whatever. But with anything in life, it's really just And I think if you're able to visualize what's happening more and kind of pull yourself away from the experience, like you're saying, increasing the time between impulse and action, the more time you have to kind of, let's say, break that pattern.
But I think the fact that we went down that road as much as we did is a testament to the difficulty of conversion. It's one of those, becoming baptized, being part of the Church of God is not, you're not just put in a social club. You're not just, you don't just all of a sudden get a membership card in this group. This is really arduous process of daily introspection and fighting, and it's beautiful, but it's tough, and we need each other. And so the church, the people who are already baptized or have been going through the conversion process for a while, I think it's important we are there for the young people to not penalize them when they ask difficult questions or when they want to be vulnerable, not shaming them.
And to giving them access to, we mirror, right? It's this idea of mirroring and then leading. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think that, again, it gets back to the culture. If we can just keep, bit by bit, piece by piece, right? A little bit at a time. And that's why it's going to take some time, I think, to cultivate a safe space in the church. But seriously, though, really, to kind of over time, to give these, let's call them little ones, techions,
you realize that's what the title of the podcast is going to be. Blake Silverstein talks about the need for safe spaces in the church.
Great. This podcast is over. But no, I think that there is, and hey, look, fair enough. But the vulnerability, the ability to say, I have been struggling with these things, and this is some things that I've noticed. And I've had some successes here, and I've been, kind of not so successful here, and this is what what I've noticed. I think that those are interesting sermons, and maybe there's a Jewish, Yiddish expression, the chutzpah. You've never heard of this?
I'm from New York,
so yeah, exactly. Some gall, to some wherewithal to share such a message. And I'm getting there. That people say, look, share your testimony. That's maybe that's what people have been waiting for. There's been a lot of great stuff out there. I'm not saying that there isn't someone out there that's doing this, but let's keep doing it. Keep helping out everyone, not just the youth, because I think they'll come along, right? They'll be there as long as we're focused on some of these things that each and every one of us is looking forward to. There's also this thing in the background for me, which is like that maybe the prosperity, the opulence that we've experienced here in the United States has given rise to some of this. C.S. Lewis says this great thing. He says, we react to evangelism like an overweight businessman after a large luncheon. We're just kind of like, oh yeah, this kind of this lethargy that's kind of pervasive in the culture. And it's like, because we don't have any urgency, right? We have no enemy, and like there's that whole thing. So maybe a little strife will go a long way. A little bit of persecution would have us come together real quick. And then Ron says this great thing at the end of his message. He says, the big three, says, look, as much as the splits have hurt us, as much as we've been divided, at the end of the day, I think whenever we're in prison all together, they didn't ask us which church we were affiliated with before throwing us in the gulag, right? How long is it going to take us to hug each other's necks? Sure. I don't think it'll take that.
Man, I just, whenever I hear that, like, I get it, but I don't want to have to be
caused by that. Just so people know, Daniel's over here shaking his head. Okay? Just so you know.
But I do get it, and it might take that. It's just, I would hope it doesn't.
Can't we all just have a hug now?
Hug each other's necks now. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
The other thing I'm thinking of too, and you kind of touched on it, but not just helping young people, but helping everyone in the church. That I think there's this. I know even on occasion I sort of bristle by the designation of a certain segment as young people. because I think stratifying the church based on age or really anything can be harmful. And I think one of the best things about how I grew up is that age didn't matter. Like there were no other young people. So to this day, I'll go down and visit friends of mine who are, in their 60s, like, hey, let me come spend the weekend with you. And we just hang out. Like it's the same relationship that I have with you guys.
Yeah.
And that was so powerful to me. And I think probably I'm too big of a tangent to go into on this podcast, but I think treating young people like they belong here, like they're valued members of the Church of God community, that you're an equal here, right? Like if you're baptized and you're going through this together, like maybe if you haven't been baptized, you're still learning, we're here to help you. Yeah. But once you're in the body, like you're one of us, and your opinion matters the same way mine does.
I call out the young people in our church and say, what do you think? Well, we'll have a Bible study, and they're kind of like deer in the headlights, but you know what? they rise to the occasion. They kind of, shake off the anxiety or whatever. And they kind of put together, they kind of articulate cogent thought. And it's like, hey, that fear turns into elation. It gets transformed to elation. And so I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right that we don't treat them any differently than we would, an adult in some ways, right? And give them an opportunity to posture. This is the other thing, creating structure, not a safe space structure, but a structure, to really posture it. And because I think competition is really good, in a lot of ways. Good competition is good for all involved. When is it bad? Well, when it becomes toxic, that's whenever, you get people that are dominating and kind of over and over kind of slapping down people, right?
It's the Beatles versus the Beach Boys competition. Pet Sounds comes out. Man, we want to do it better. And Sgt. Pepper's comes out. It's admiration.
It's absolutely. It's healthy competition. And I think that, how does that apply to the church? Well, you try to find good ways for young people to posture and to kind of give, in a social setting, a way to continue to struggle, to continue to try to strive to be better. And I think that's a good thing. We're still trying to figure out, I think, how we create that.
Because it's the other thing, another impactful moment when I was growing up was, I remember vividly, again, probably being 7 or 8 years old, and the most exciting thing in the world was when brethren would come through and visit us. We lived in downstate New York, so if someone was coming through, even just flying into LaGuardia or something, 45 minutes north, they come stay with us for a weekend, and as we're passing through. So I remember being in our dining room with a bunch of brethren, and they were talking about whatever was going on in the church at the time. It's probably the late 90s, so like complete chaos. And I'm enthralled, and my dad turns to me and goes, "What do you think?" I'm like, "What?" It's like, we care what you think, man. Like your opinion matters. And I, was 10 years old or something.
Yeah.
But I remember that moment, a switch flipped on. Like, my opinion has value. Like that doesn't mean I'm right, but that I can contribute. I can work. I can work to contribute. Tim's like, more often than not. But and that was just another thing that lit a fire. This idea that I can be a contributor now, and that the more I work on this thing, and the more I study or go through life, and the more tread I have on the tires, you get to a certain age, and you're now I remember when I was in my late 20s and now my early 30s, realizing, man, like I have actual life experience now. I can talk with people who are full blown adults, or even 10, 20, 30 years older than me. And I could talk about life, and maybe they can even learn something from me, which is a novel concept. And you wonder how many young people think or are told, people can learn from you too, or you're going through things that are important and unique, and eventually you'll be able to pass it on to other people.
There's also kind of this thing in the background, like where you think you know them. You think you know them as a young person, right? And you discredit them as being, anything other than what you've young and dumb and experienced. Yeah. So maybe you don't know them, maybe you can take on the case that they are interesting and they will say something that might shock you. And, you know, I have had that happen a lot, you know, with some of the young people in our church that will blow you away with what they know and what they, you know, what they've thought about. And they're very deep, you know, and a lot of times they are struggling with some things that are very similar to what we're struggling with, you know. And I think that maybe taking the case that you don't know them, that they have something of value to share and to offer. And you know what? If you listen to people that way, just people, not even young people, more times than not, something valuable does get shared by them. They do share something of value, and you listen to them like they are valuable, and listen to them like they have something interesting to say. And so maybe there's some of that going on too. And I'm talking to myself as much as anyone, right? It's like, you know, to remind myself that you don't know that person. We're in uncharted territory. And yeah, there might be and there's just a propensity to continue to look towards the past, you know, or we're doomed to fail to repeat history, this whole thing, right? It's like, well, yeah, fair enough. You know, there's some of that going on, but this moment is unique. This time is unique, you know, and to really bring that to our experience with other people, especially when talking to young people, give them some authentic, direct attention. And to continue to get curious about what is going on over there in their world, and to find out what they're up to.
Yeah, because the importance of it. I mean, obviously being biased, my undergrad degree is in history, and I love history. But it's an accurate understanding of history is valuable insofar as it informs the path forward, and to. You can't live in history. You can't, I mean, you can be passionate about it, but you can't assume because something happened or was effective at a certain point that it is going forward. You could take principles. You could definitely see if something failed a ton back in the day. Like maybe we shouldn't keep trying the same thing and expecting something different.
That's right.
But I'd imagine at some core level, though, the stuff we're talking about has probably just been effective for all of human history, like help someone feel valued, show them the time of day. And I get it. You used to talk about talking to yourself as much as anyone. I was telling Tim last night, in many ways, being in the church now and feeling like I can contribute is very much like I got drafted to the NFL. Like it's what I've wanted for my whole life, and now you're in it. Yeah. And so you can easily get caught up in talking, you know, the three of us talking or talking with other people in the church, and you could forget that there's a whole segment of people coming up that need your time as well. And I'm taking stock of the fact that people like Jonathan Reedy or Isaac Garcia, who's on our board now for CGN Network, gave me so much of their time when I was growing up, and now I'm the age they were when they were doing it for me. So it's my turn to give it back to younger people, and it's our time to make sure that people get the mentorship or the time of day they need.
Giving them and also giving them a purpose, giving them Lewis says, we should relate to our faith as that we are behind enemy lines, and that we are, at battle, and we are, and that's like, man, that's a whole different context than what I see going on around me in most of churchianity, and so like, man, how about that operating context that you are, in battle, and it's serious, and there are, you're as interested in something as to the degree to which something is at stake. And that's like, so what is at stake? Well, man, we should create, and that's subjective. So like, maybe you should build a huge, something's at risk that's big for yourself, right? Not that it'll all be fine, it'll all be okay, that's something maybe to give over to the youth.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept too. Maybe this could be the last thing. Maybe I'll pause at something.
I'm getting the dumb. I'm sorry, man.
But like maybe I'll mention this because it relates, and maybe you guys could respond and we'll call it. But I've been thinking about it that this life is a boot camp. It's boot camp. Like it's because it needs to be hard, intense training.
Yeah. And
not supposed to be comfortable, and it's also not the end goal. Like when you die, and the next moment of consciousness is the resurrection. It's not over. Like it's just beginning. You're now in the landing crafts, landing on Normandy. The work starts in the kingdom. It doesn't end there, and so this is training for people. And I wonder I would imagine younger people would get energized if that was the prevailing theme. It's like, we're here to do work. We're here to do intense preparation. It's not, okay, well, we're baptized. We're going to keep these handful of rules or observances until Christ comes, and that's it. It's like, we need to work on ourselves. We're all struggling. We have to come together. We have to make sure we give back to people.
Yeah, I love that. That's exactly how I usually sum up to people what my life view, quote unquote, is that it's really just a training ground or preparation for what the next life offers. So a lot of decisions I make are under that context. Like, well, how does this contribute towards my growth and advancement towards that end? And it's not an easy thing, because sometimes I'm like, man, I'd rather just chill and hang out and have a good time. But that's something I resist,
Yeah.
And earlier you mentioned, what was it you said? It was, you are interested to the degree that
to which something
is at stake.
Yeah.
Well, for all of us, the common thing that we all have at stake is eternal life. That's the greatest.
Yeah. Is there more? Is there a higher stake?
Is there a higher stake than that?
Yeah.
And how do we tap into that together?
Yeah, without it becoming a toxic cudgel that people use to guilt you into doing something, right?
Well,
or whatever.
It's being part of the recreation, not only the recreation, but it's being part of the expansion of the God family. Like, we're the advanced team. We are going to be co-saviors with Christ in the world tomorrow. Like, that's such an intensely important thing, and learning all we can about ourselves and humanity and having empathy for people in the world and in the church now is so important, because we're going to be working with Christ to save them in the world tomorrow. And
we get this in the Church of God. You don't get this in Protestant or in Catholicism. That it's mostly something like, you're going to be on a cloud somewhere plucking a harp for eternity, right? It's like, that might be interesting for like a million years, right? Whatever. But won't that get boring after maybe the second, a million years or something like this? And like, we understand that, there is going to be work to do. And, I keep bringing up Ron, but I do work for Christian Educational Ministries. Says God wants to spend you like so much spiritual currency. It's like, oh, okay. He wants to use you, not just save your miserable hide so that you can just sit there and pluck a harp and stare up into the face of God, right? It's like, well, fair enough. Like, then, but there's something like you're saying, there's work to do, and that should turn you on. That should give you a very, there's a lot at stake, and that there is what you're doing now won't just, affect you here and now. It's going to affect you for eternity. And there's this interesting idea that, that the last enemy to be defeated will be what? Death. And so like that, there's something to that. It's like, okay, so now this thing has been removed. So maybe the progress that you've made in this life will be tallied up. Something like that. The progress that you've made here in this life, in this battleground, this training ground, is what will set that marker. And that could be completely wrong. There might be the ability to progress in the world tomorrow, but
there's something about the parable of the talents. That principle is there. I don't pretend to understand the extent of it.
But God, and I brought this up in a recent message, to say, look, from all the way that we can see, there's a couple different encounters in Scripture that we say God likes to work inside of a council. The heavenly host, right? And there's this interesting encounter where God's like, I think it's in 1 Kings 22, where Jehoshaphat and Ahab are getting together. They're talking about going and attacking the city, and anyways, there's this encounter that they want to go to they wanted to get the counsel from the prophets and from the priest, right? And the priests are all telling him, "Oh, go, king! The victory will be handed over into your hand." And they're all just giving him lip service. They're basically on the payroll, right? Yeah. And then Jehoshaphat's getting a little nervous, and he said, "Don't you have one of those?
Is there anyone else?
Yeah, is there anyone else here? Right? This whole thing, right?" And he said, "Well, yeah, there is, but I hate that guy." That's kind of what he says. He never says anything. He never prophesies anything nice or good about me, right? Yeah. And he said, "All right, well, let's go see what he has to say." And so Micaiah comes out and he's like, "Hey, yeah, what's going on?" "Oh, yeah, you'll be fine. Go, you'll be great."
Why are you lying to me?
Yeah. He said, hold on. I know. now the gig's up. You're up to something. How many times have I told you not to lie to me? And he says, well, all right, so here it is. And he gives this account where God is in a council room, it seems like. And he says, the Elohim say this and the Elohim are saying that. So he's in this group with these other beings and he's saying, how are we going to tempt Ahab? Well, wait, I thought God was all powerful, right? Sure. Knows everything. Well, yeah, he is. But apparently he's interested in working with us. He wants to create community. He wants to create an opportunity, a structure for us to.
But he needs free choice on our part.
And free will comes into this whole thing, right? And that's that's a beautiful part of it. And but he's omniscient, so he knows. And so the Spirit, kind of raises his hand. Oh, me, pick me, Yeah. I'll be a lying mouth put into the mouth of their prophets. He's like, you know what? That'll work. Go and do it. And so there's there might be this process of kind of, working through this thing. God sets the agenda. God sets the thing that we're going to do. Now, how are we going to do it? God wants to work with us. God wants to spend us and use us, right? And that is something that's, I think that might be singular to the Church of God. I don't know if there's any other real forms of Christianity that really understand that God wants to work with us.
Well, we're the only... Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we're the only segment that believes that the reward is to become God as God is God. So
theosis, theosis.
And there's so much in Scripture about seeking a multitude of counsel and working together.
Yes.
Threefold.
There's some great lessons to be taken.
Broken.
That's right.
If that wasn't an attribute of God's nature or personality, why would there be so much emphasis on that?
That's a whole another episode. So we probably need to pump the brakes right now before we talk for another full episode. But thanks, guys. It's great.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to help with you guys.
Yep. Thanks, man.